ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Crunchy Take podcast. And today, you may notice that the person to my left is not Eric, is not a dude. I know this is a pretty sports-centric podcast, and we've talked.
Not a dude.
Yeah, no, it's not. We've talked about everything from basketball, MMA to Chernobyl to some movies, all nerd guy stuff, right? But today, I have the privilege of having on a dear friend. Not old. She's not old yet. Not in my eyes. Not ever. I have on Alexis Hale. Alexis, how's it going?
Going pretty, man. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
Yep. As I said before, I've only been doing this for about 2 months, but we've had some pretty interesting analytics pop up. I don't know if you listened to the last one, but I made a swift announcement that we've been clicked on in 12 different countries. Yeah, 12. Now only 4 of them really account for more than 20% of viewership and listenership, if that's the word. But no, yeah, we've come a little bit, crossed about 700 listens as of yesterday. Hey, I only expected about 10 to 15 viewers on average. And now we have accumulated for everything. It's been about 700 now. So hey, thank you to whoever's listening so far. But no, today is about Alexis Hale. Alexis is a former student at Taylor, as am I. That's not where we met. Where we meet, Alexis? What is your first memory of me?
You're my sort of boss.
Oh, no.
Way back in the day.
You can't call me a boss. You cannot call me up. You
Kathy
can't.
was like, this is James. He's going to be your boss. And I was like, who is this kid?
Did I ever strike you as a boss? Did I ever compose myself as a boss? Seriously
I
asking.
don't think you talked to me for like the first 2 weeks.
I didn't talk to you. How'd I didn't talk to you?
Because we were just in the editing room. We did like stuff for Praircast, right? So like you're editing videos, I was doing acquisition, fake editing stuff as well.
All
so,
these words are bringing back a lot of PTSD
totally
for me.
Dude, I know.
Well, okay, yeah. So for context, we worked at a video editing / music studio, as I like to call it. One Way. That's out in Aurora, Illinois. Credits to them, props to them. Still love the people there. But yeah, so I worked as intern video editor. I was told that I'd be not the only one, but lo and behold, I get there and I work directly with who's another dear friend of mine. I met him at college, Daniel. Cool guy. No, did I really strike you? I really didn't talk to you at all. No, here's the thing. Sorry if I'm...
I mean, it was like 3 high schoolers got thrown in with like these 2 guys that are actually doing work. And so it was like, I didn't want to like disturb you or Daniel. And then it just took a while for us to like actually talk to each other, you know?
Interesting. Well, I don't think, did you consider that actual work, first of all? Like, would you... Everything, and I don't want to get into the politics of it, obviously, but like, do you, because, and I wanted to bring this up, honestly, this is a good thing we're on, because where we're from, or where in your case, where we've been, child labor laws are very, very, very interesting. You know, what you can allow a kid to do in Asia, I think is very different than America, you know? So, but did you, so 2 questions for you right off the bat. Did you consider that actual work? Did you find it valuable? And 2, what was actually your first job?
All right, I'm going to do the first job question first because it's easier. Like my first job that I like got paid for is like nannying, because I just have always been around kids and families. And so like parents would just trust me and be like, here's my child. And so I feel like that's my first job. Although some people probably wouldn't count it, but it was like, I would like watch these kids for like a full weekend. Like I had like straight custody of them sometimes. So I'd count that. And as far as like whether One Way Ministries is work or not, I think that I don't know that that actual internship part was, but I would still count it as work because of the hours that, like, I spent doing it, and, like, I could have been going somewhere else to, like, get paid, right? Could have gone to Wendy's, whatever. And so I think that, and I value, like, Faircast and, like, the ministries that they have, and e even so much that I, because it was just, like, I mean, I was in high school for part of it, so it was, like, I really was figuring out, like, what I wanted to do in life and what,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So I would consider it in some aspects, but I don't know, even the culture there, they, like, work hard on projects, but it's not as ruthless as, like, Amazon or something where it's like, "No, you're, like, just here to work." Like, they really want you to, like, build friendships there and, I don't know, do other
Mm-hmm.
stuff. So,
Yeah, and the reason I asked is because I work right now. It's at a grocery store. I can't help but be jealous of American kids when when I find out that way they can start driving on the road with a permit at 16 or 15. Okay, where we have
14
been.
in some states.
Okay, 14 in some states, dude. That's eighth grade. You're at the tail end
Jeez.
of eighth grade. Think of how on top of the world you have to be at eighth grade in America. The ideal. I'm talking the suburban, white suburban, or not even white, but like the idea is you're 14. You're just now experiencing this change in your body. Not only that, your mind is changing. You're thinking, as a dude, you're thinking about girls differently, okay? And then how much more power are you given? Your ability, you are able to work at a certain age, what, 15 or 16? That's the cutoff, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So
It depends on what state you're in, but
so you're able to work, drive, make money for yourself all as a teenager. That stuff I'm actually pretty jealous of. It's because I think you build
yeah.
so much character. Even if it is something like one way where you aren't specifically getting paid, you still are doing hours. You know, it's because
Oh, yeah.
where we have been. I'm from Thailand. Uh, you're from everywhere. You've seen just
Yeah.
how much of an emphasis certain cultures put on education, but almost too much at a tipping point or whatnot. So you spent a little bit of time, or okay, let's do this. What exactly is, like, can you give me the number of years and where you spent your time basically? So I know Hong Kong is part of the narrative. I don't know if Bangkok, Thailand
Yeah,
is part of the narrative at all, but
for
yeah,
sure.
kind of give me the roadmap to
A little
where.
bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so born in Washington State. I honestly don't know how long I lived there. Um, let's say a year. And then I lived in a handful of states. So I lived in Kansas. I think we were kind of over on the Missouri line at one point. I was a pretty little kid, so it's like we moved a few times in each of those states. And then the most impactful move, I think, like for obvious reasons, is when I was 12, we moved to Hong Kong. So we
Okay.
lived there for 2 years and we spent, I have an auntie and uncle that were living in Bangkok at the time. So we spent a lot of time in Bangkok,
Nice.
and
Nice.
just in surrounding countries in Asia.
Mm-hmm.
And then in high school, I moved to Chicago, so we lived in the city for a little bit, and then we moved out to Aurora, so like the suburbs. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so I lived in Aurora for like 4 years, I think, and then I moved to Taylor, and then moved back. So I don't know if you want to count that or not, but
No, I count that. I count that because
that's
here's
kind of the list.
I don't ever want to disregard Taylor for any student, even if you grew up in the Midwest. It's because Taylor and, let's just say, Upland, okay? That whole Grant County and Marion, we're talking about a very, very different Midwest than what a lot of Taylor kids surprisingly are used to. Would you say
Yeah,
that's true? So, like, you go from, you Aurora, okay? Or Naperville, or, you name it, Carmel, Indiana. Then you go all the way up to Upland, Indiana, and it's a completely different world. So even for people with like learned experience, with like learned, I'm sure there's an anthropology term here that I'm missing.
Socializing, maybe, I don't know.
Sure, like your social skills that you built up. Suddenly, you go to this bubble essentially. Kind of like the NBA has their bubble right now. It's literally just a bunch of millionaires playing basketball or whatnot. It's almost essentially the same thing, and as a result of that, Christian campus culture it's kind of formed out of that small kind of bubble experience.
Yeah,
a lot of meshing of cultures. But before we get to Christian colleges, so you said a few years in Hong Kong, then you moved back, right? So you're saying that your childhood years were all in pretty much Hong Kong, or like in Asia for the most part, or a big portion of those years.
Yeah. So if you want to split it into like elementary school, middle school, high school, I had like elementary school in like Midwest, like kind of like a perfect Midwest life. Like we had a house and a few dogs and all my siblings, like we had a good time. And then to this tiny apartment in Hong Kong. So that's where I lived for like middle school, was like basically Hong Kong or like Asia. And then high school was like, then like after you figure out like who you are and who you want to be, kind of, then I'm like thrown back into the Midwest, and I'm supposed to already understand and know this culture, when it was like, oh, I totally don't. So
I spent a whole class, I kid you not, yeah, you know this already, but that whole class was centered around that feeling. It's a weird feeling. How, like, what are some key words you try to give to someone to try to understand what it's like living either as an expat kid or as a missionary kid? And I know this is like this right here, what it's like to be a missionary kid or like a third culture, a TCK or whatnot. That is like the brunt. That's like the main theme of 4 years worth of morning dews. Okay. And for would you agree? It's like whenever I ask someone, hey, so what has your experience been like? I can see it in their eyes. This like this massive kind of not even PTSD. What do you call it? Just
it's like a burden though. Like just culture shock.
A burden.
Sometimes, yeah, I would say like a lot of confusion, but also it brings a lot of depth, because I think you're having to consider like there's like external culture where like what I listen to like music wise, how I dress, the language that I speak, right? But then there's like the internal culture of like kind of like how I think I should be loved, how I think I should love other people, what's right, what's wrong, honor, shame, just like how you value education, or like what you think success is. And so at a young age, you're like trying to understand like internally like your own culture and how you think about those things, but you don't really understand what they are. And then also you're trying to understand like the many people around you who are like conflicting to like what your maybe parents or role models. Like my parents are Americans, right? So like I would perceive things or understand things would mirror how they understand or perceive things. And sometimes it would mirror like more of like my Asian friends, or like the upbringing they had, because of like things that influenced me and them, if that makes sense. So there's a lot of depth that I think you can gain from it as well. But yeah, I would say sometimes it's a burden.
I like the terms that you used, external and internal culture. I think that very accurate. For me, it accurately describes the layers to which you experience. Is that like an actual like educational / academia term that, or is it just like something you made on the spot? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but like, yeah, that's a good way to describe it. So you got external culture, right? And for our case, probably magnified by 1,000 by the internet, you know? So, because if you have a YouTube, if you've looked at YouTube, if you were born, in the mid 2000s or in the 90s, and you grew up sort of without the internet, but there was a certain point that the internet entered your life, then everything changed. Suddenly, it seemed like the world's youth was somehow united under one banner without making it sound cheesy, you know? Um, with that being said, do you remember like your first instances of, like, did you guys grow up with the internet or no? Can you describe what it was like if you did at one point, didn't have the internet at one point?
Yeah. I think I very much grew up with the internet. I don't really remember not having it.
Mm-hmm.
I think because we like moved a lot, we used Skype and FaceTime all the time to talk to my grandparents and extended family and friends. And so um I think that like it's hard to have a long distance relationship with a child anyways. And I think it's like almost impossible like without the internet.
Yeah.
Especially if the kid's like not writing, you can't really like write letters or read. So um yeah, I would say that I pretty much just grew up with the internet.
Mm-hmm. You grew up with it. What's your earliest like kind of? So when you say grew up with it, ever since you were like a toddler or like early years, below 5 years of age, you guys were using Skype, whatnot? Because
Mhm.
Skype was a service, like a legit video calling. I mean, as we know it
Yeah.
today, but it was the first. It was kind of the first major one that was commercially available to people, and you had to pay for it a lot. You know.
Yeah. Um I would say probably the first time I remember like using the computer consciously was like um somewhere between 2003 and like 2006.
Mm-hmm.
Um I was pretty young. So I don't know if that was just like the first time we had it or if
Mm-hmm.
like we that's just the first time I remember. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why I would say like it's just always kind of been around
Yeah. Yeah, no, the reason I
to
asked
some
is
degree.
because again, we're talking about external and internal culture, right? The things that we kind of have in
Yeah.
common, even with people that, grew up 8,000 miles around the world. So for me, what made it easier for me to transition to a place like middle of nowhere Taylor was having a roommate that played the same video game as me, whatever, Super Mario, you name it, BioShock, you name it. Yeah, it's weird because our generation, as every other generation has, there are technologies and there are mechanisms that kind of make each culture, each age different than the last. But it seems like somewhere in the mid 2000s, somewhere, because the 90s, I talked about this with my cousin last time because he's exactly 10 years older than me. So he experienced high school right at the turn of the freaking century, and me like 10 years later. But for whatever reason, 2000 and 2010 are completely different years. Like they're aesthetically, technologically very different. And so the way
Mm,
we communicate is very different. Same, but if you were to take, the 90s, 1990 and 1980, yeah, there are some aesthetic differences, but the way people communicated with each other is pretty much the same. Um,
right.
and that's talking to a lot of older people that were teenagers then, parents, they kind of, it all kind of blends into one, but there's this weird point. And it really boils down to the year, in the mid 2000s where things got crazy. It went from flip phone to this, you know, it went from, uh, it went from CDs to MP3s. It went, from MP3s to iTunes, um, yeah, to iTunes to LimeWire for people that use that. And now we have Spotify, you know. Yeah, it's an interesting study. So before, you said you were in America for 2 years prior to Taylor, right?
I think 4
Four.
years.
Okay. Oh, so you experienced like
Mm-hmm.
a full.
So my high
You
school was like in
all America.
America.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So back to the whole like child labor thing. um, did you have a job as a teenager at all?
um yeah, I guess it depends like what you would consider a job.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Or do you mean like when
I
I
think
lived in the US or like Asia or like
Sure, let's go with Asia for a little bit. Did you work while you were in Asia? Like, because you weren't a teenager for very long in Asia, right? Like you were, like the beginning years of your, um, teenage years were in Asia, and like if you said you did a whole high school experience in America, that's like at least that's 15 and up, 14, 15 and up.
yeah,
You know, so the formative
right.
teenage years, which are very important, you know, the formative years of your teenage life. You know, think
Yeah.
about it. Think about how much of is formed in your head by the time you hit 14 or by the time you hit 13. You know,
Yeah.
1, 2, 3 years. You combine that. I know I'm jumping between topics here, but you combine that with how much things changed in the mid 2000s. Yikes. You now, you know, yikes. Big yikes. You know? So yeah, in a weird way, I think what I'm trying to ask is like, did was growing up in Asia that different for you than growing up in America, considering everything we're talking about, considering the impact of the internet, and considering like the fact that you sort of grew up, if we're talking about Hong Kong, that's a very international city. That's a country city. That's a very
Right. Yeah.
technologically advanced city. People don't know about when they think about Asian countries and, you know, countries that speak Chinese. A lot of the times the mental image people think about here is, oh, you know, they're smart, but they don't have, you know, you've probably gotten dumb questions. You probably haven't, but I've gotten questions like, oh, did you have Wi-Fi growing up? Like stuff like that, where it's,
Right.
you know, like a cultural bridge.
Yeah.
But yeah, how much of that was true for you? Like,
Yeah.
was it that different? Was it really that different in your opinion?
Of course, it was different in a lot of ways. I think, like obviously technologically, like my life just continued as I think I got my first phone, my little Nokia, when I was like in Hong Kong because I was
Oh.
taking the MTR by myself and
Ooh.
um because like I'm growing up, I had more freedoms now,
Mm-hmm.
so like more technologies were like given to me or more responsibilities. Um, but there were some things like um so like we didn't always have like clean water running to our taps. So
Hmm.
like the technology is there and like it could be accessed, but it wasn't always like valued, if that makes sense, which is like it's kind of like a cultural thing, I guess. And so like there were days when like yeah, the water was a little foggy or kind of red from rust or something. So like we would have to use bottled water.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think of other differences.
Yeah, no, that's not unique to Hong
And
Kong at
also,
all. Keep going.
what?
Keep going. I was just about to say that's not like that's really not unique to Hong Kong at all. But I do understand.
Right.
There seems to be this total, because you come here. It took me a little bit to get used. You know, because I spent 18 years. You know, I grew up in Thailand. I was, you know,
Right.
all that.
Right.
It took me a hot second to like get used to the fact that people were using tap water for drinking. You know,
Yeah.
dude, because you're taught from an early age in, let's say, developing countries. Bangkok isn't exactly a developing city, but it's rustic enough to where the sewage and the water treatments and all that, you're taught to believe that that's somewhat not made for drinking,
Yeah.
even though it technically
Right.
is.
It's like not
It
always
probably
clean.
is like
Right.
not that bad at all. It's not that different from America, but the culture here is, oh yeah, you want water in your water bottle, go fill it up at the tap. The first
Here's
time
the
I was
sink.
told that,
Yeah.
yeah, the first time I was told that was at Thanksgiving. I spent Thanksgiving up in Fort Wayne. It was pretty much the same thing. Like, yeah, I'm thirsty. You guys have any water? I'm like, oh, all right, this is how it is now. It's just like flipped in my brain. When I went back to Taylor, I stopped like when I went back to Taylor after Thanksgiving. This was my freshman year. I stopped using the water fountain. I just went straight to the freaking kitchen and went back to my room.
Yep. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, shoot, if it's all the same thing, bam, go for it. Even plus points if you can get a Brita.
Yeah.
You know? Interesting. Running water. You still remember
also,
that,
like,
huh? Those
keep
are
in mind,
memories.
I don't know. I also, there was like the huge culture clash of like, in Kansas, I was living in like a suburb, and so I went from a suburb to like now I'm in like one of the largest international cities in the world. And so like all of a sudden like diversity is like at a whole nother level, right? Like I live in a French community, and like across the street is like the Korean club, or you know, so there's just like so many
this
international
is you're talking about
influences.
Chicago, right? Or you're talking about Illinois? You're talking
Hong
about
Kong.
Hong Kong. Okay.
So like from Kansas to Hong Kong.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. How do you define diversity?
So I mean, there's so many ways.
I know there's so many ways to go, but let me shoot you my spiel. Because when people say diverse, I don't know if they're talking about them being the minority or it actually being diverse. You know what I'm saying? Because something that
I
irks
really
me,
mean like diverse, like racially, economically, religiously, nationality wise, like that is very much the experience of like my like close group or my community. There were pretty much every religion represented, several different countries represented, so many languages represented, different races represented. And so that's like what I think of like when someone says diverse. And then like, but I think that in America that usually means like, oh, we have like 4 people who are not white, and so we're diverse now, which I do not agree with.
I don't agree with that at all, but I think for me, I grew up in a pretty homogenous society, which, you know, if you're part of the majority. And for a while, that was how I viewed diversity, you know, different backgrounds, beliefs, everything from ethnicity or whatnot. But something changed. And it always kind of irked me whenever I went to, whenever I was at Taylor and someone would say, oh, this is one of the least diverse places I've ever been. Despite the fact that I'm a minority, I'm now a minority at the school. What kind of bothers me about that statement the most is that you're totally disregarding everything else that, you know, because it kind of harkens back to what you're saying, you know, oh, 4 people that aren't white. You could put a bunch of black students and Asian students at a school. That don't make it diverse, you know, because they can all kind of think the same way. You know what I'm saying? Like, there seemed to be.
So you're saying like more of like the internal culture diversity,
which that's a brilliant way to put it. Internal culture thing, because that's the kind of thing that really the internal. So what do we man, you got me thinking a lot about internal. What is internal culture for you?
Oh, that's a big question.
No, like, because how can we use that to define diversity? And the reason I bring it up is because like it really bothers me. It really bothered me when I was at Taylor and someone said this place isn't diverse. Because I know it's predominantly white, but there are some very, very different people here. And I can't quite put a finger on the term that describes someone's beliefs and characteristics, but not exactly like their values. Or maybe I am describing their values, you know, because you can take, I was on Broho. Okay, it's no secret that yes, it is probably the most rambunctious, but at the same time, a very fun-loving group. They were very different people. They, on one floor, I'm just using them as a petri dish, by the way. You got very different personalities, but then like you'll have Res Life, and you'll have different organizations at the school putting all white people under one category. You know, that pisses
Yeah.
me off so much because there's no way you can tell me that, X and X and Z are the same people. Yeah, I don't know.
Right.
Maybe it's just a me thing because, being a minority now, I see more. I often joke with people that Taylor is the most diverse place I've ever been. Because no one else thinks like me. No, well, not a lot of people. Yeah, I think that's what I'm getting at, Alexis.
Yeah.
A college is a place where you go to be confronted with other people that think differently than you in a bubble,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think very interesting. You might disagree with me on this, but at least from my experience, I feel like Taylor, in a lot of ways, was a place that tried to both celebrate differences yet mold everyone into having very similar ideas. And so that just kind of like clashed or pushed people to like hide it when they felt like they had different ideas. So like there would be people like to use drinking alcohol for an example. Um obviously it's not allowed in the LTC, right? So like people at Taylor, they don't drink alcohol. However, but if you like talk to them about their experiences of like, okay, did you grow up in a family where your parents drank alcohol? Did you grow up drinking alcohol with your parents? Then all of a sudden it's like a subject that people felt like they needed to whisper about and be like, oh, well, yeah, like my parents have a glass of wine at dinner and like but like we don't like tell her, and so they're like almost um sort of like there are taboo subjects or like taboo beliefs almost that like I felt like some people, although they were different and they're very much like outside of Taylor, they acted differently than like someone who believed that like alcohol was like the greatest sin ever, right? But there's almost like a weird like sometimes there's freedom to talk about those differences and sometimes in some settings I felt like it was like more of a pressure to like fit into this um polished Christian mold.
Okay.
And I understand that might be like offensive and hard to hear, and it's like a generalized statement. Like I don't think everyone is guilty of putting pressure on people to like fit into that mold, but I definitely felt like it was an aspect that was there, at least in my experience.
No, yeah. I guess that never really I never felt the pressure to conform. Because I never went out of my way to, can I put this on record? Yeah. I never went out of my way to drink until I was 21. The thing that always got me about that rule was the fact that was this core belief, me and my cousin and a bounty of other people have joked about. But whenever you tell a group of people you can't do something, what are they going to do?
They're going to do it.
Now, think about the psychology of it for a second. If Taylor or any Christian institution didn't mention it at all, would it be that big of a problem? They'd for sure have other problems.
Just a problem in this nation, like
but the stigma.
I was just using it as an example.
Right. Yeah. No. I often try to. It's so weird talking about college experiences with people. At least for me, it was weird at first talking about college experiences with people that went to like secular, like UC Davis or UC Berkeley. My cousin, I have a cousin who goes to UC Berkeley. I visited her and I visited her, went to a couple of frats, whatnot, checked them out. Dude, the culture is so different. But what I don't get is the overwhelming sense that everyone is cooped up and horny, like they are at Christian campuses. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I'm firmly of the belief, honestly, that Christian campuses. Some people may get offended at this. I don't care. I think they're way hornier. They're way more pent up than these other colleges that just like. Now, it's not to say like other colleges are like the archangel or whatnot. It's just like wow,
Right.
But I think there is something to be said about the whole culture of telling people what they can and can't do, and how this relates to internal culture or whatnot. I guess
Right.
it never bothered me, in a sense that I never felt like I had to conform because I was already very
Mm-hmm.
different to begin with. You know, people, I used to have this thing where I'd look at a bunch of, some people are very patriotic on Burho. I'm just gonna I'm gonna be very frank.
No way,
Very
I'm
patriotic.
shocked.
Wow, yeah, wow, shock. Yeah, I'd have several people coming up to me, James, do you think America's the greatest country in the world? I'm like, I don't have an answer for you there. Like, I have two passports. Yes, America's great because my parents met here. I wouldn't be born if it wasn't for America. Um, and I've often, you see the flag friggin' behind me. I never used to have that. But I remember thinking, you look at all these people with flags or whatnot, on their doors, you know, wherever. It used to always dawn on me, I don't ever need to have one in my room, ever. You know why? Because the flag is my skin color, you know. So in a way, I never felt this pressure to conform the Christian to what you're describing. Probably because I felt
Mm,
so different already coming in. And
yeah.
I guess the point that I'm trying to make here is that there's more. I In a weird way, do you think the demographically white students deal more with this problem than like the international students do, or like the yeah, yeah, let's compare that, for example. Do you think you
Oh.
felt that pressure more because you actually fit the mold, you actually fit your description, but B is because there are certain expectations that you put on people of different cultures or whatnot, whether or not it's racist, whether or not we knowingly do so, you know.
Yeah. I mean, like we've talked about this before, and um just the discussion of like you are from Thailand and you look Thai. So like there's
Do
a
I?
certain expectation of like of you to like have um a different experience than maybe someone who like grew up in Fort Wayne. Um but I grew up in many different places. I was exposed to many different languages and ideas and cultures, and I look and sound very American. And so people have this expectation of me to have very similar
Mm-hmm.
suburban experiences that they have, and
Suburban
times I don't. And
experiences.
so there's like a conflicting,
Hmm.
yeah.
Suburban experiences. Alexis, what is a suburban experience? What are some of the external aspects, external culturistic aspects of
The
the
external.
suburban experience? Because guess what? I'm trying to learn it. Why? Because I live in a suburb right now. So I'm trying to figure out these
All
people,
right.
you know?
Okay. If you're living, if you're living like a good suburban life, I would say like you've probably been to a lake house maybe before.
Oof, yeah, that's true.
You probably have access to a car that you and your family can drive yourselves.
Interesting. Oh,
Maybe
this is
public
so interesting.
transportation isn't like super great or like around or ready for you to use.
Yes.
Um,
Oh, you're singing
I
music to
would
my ears right
say
now. Keep
you
going.
probably were able to I don't know, they're probably more like chain restaurants rather than like street food kind of restaurant vibes if
Oh,
you're
this
like
is
to eat
scary.
outside.
This is so scary. Keep going.
Um, this is all like based off of my experience. So, you probably went to school and you grew up with like hanging out with a set group of people your whole life. So you watch each other kind of grow up, and there's like you have history with people, like
Hmm.
roots. What else? Um, yeah, I guess, and it probably it depends too on like what suburb you're in, because obviously like there are richer suburbs and there are like poorer suburbs. So probably if you were part of a rich suburb, like you would go and buy new clothes at the end of every semester or the beginning of summer, or I don't know, so that you're always having like the best style. A
Interesting.
lot of like people have told me like have these like Christmas traditions of like having a lot of different gifts or
Hmm.
I don't know. This is it, all of this is based off of my experience and my
That's
experiences like
terrific.
listening
I love that you mentioned that
people telling me what they
the
did.
suburban
Yeah.
experience. Because guess what? I grew up in a suburb in Bangkok, and let me tell you, it's nothing like what you just described. It's I feel like
Right. Very
the
different.
term suburban. Yeah, I like that you mentioned there are richer suburbs, and yes, there are richer suburbs in Bangkok, but it seems like the image that comes to mind when we think about white, or not even, I'm sorry, not white, suburbia America, suburban America, we think about the family. You watch Ozark?
No,
All right.
not really watch
Well,
TV.
ironically enough, yeah, it's a show on Netflix. It's about a suburban family that gets mixed up with the Mexican cartel. I don't want to spoil it. It's actually a pretty good show. But yeah, they're from Naperville. And the image that they show of them at the very beginning of the show, like
No way.
episode one, Naperville, Illinois. I'm like, I watched it and I had almost like a flashback to whenever me and the boys would go to a grocery store in Oswego or anywhere. I'm like, man, I've seen that guy before. I've totally seen that guy before. I've seen that girl before. Yes, she's carrying a coffee cup of some kind, like, and um, yeah, it's interesting to see American suburbs versus suburbs in other parts of the world, because suburbs do exist, in
Right.
Thailand, for instance, but they're a lot smaller. They're actually like these small little suburban, at least for Bangkok, it's like these small pockets of people that, are not wealthy, but like it's higher economic housing basically, you know? And that to
Mm-hmm.
me was the weirdest thing because I didn't know how much I had. I didn't grow up poor, but I didn't grow up rich at the same time. International students
Right.
are this mixed bag of people. That's why when people ask, when they come here and they see like a lot of political upheaval, they see a bunch of political slash economic debates going on. International students, I think, sometimes really struggle with that because they don't really have a frame of reference as to how the whole Republican and Democrat thing.
Yeah.
That took me years to kind of read.
Dude.
That took me years to read between the lines because on the outside looking in, I would say 90% of people would say that Taylor is Republican. How false can you get? Like, you know,
Oh, so false.
it is so false.
Yeah.
And all that to say, yeah, I think for me, like it's interesting to see, to observe how that was a kind of common mutual ground for a lot of people that went to that campus, because a lot of people, for better or for worse, these people can afford college, you know and I don't think you should be ashamed of it. If I felt like at a school like Taylor, I can't speak for other schools, but at a school like Taylor, a lot of people kind of, they were ashamed that they were from white suburban America or whatnot. Or sorry, I don't mean to describe white, but like predominantly white area, suburban area. And I felt at Taylor there was this like kind of unspoken shame that you were from privilege, that you weren't in control of any of it. Nothing was in your control, and yet somehow diversity is supposed to make you feel ashamed of your background. Did you ever feel that at any point in time?
Um,
I know I'm putting a lot on you, by the way, but it's just like speaking to you and
yeah.
you bringing up the suburban experience. For me, it really kind of, whoa, like, so this is what, what people what a lot of people grew up with. And for some reason, when they went to
Mhm.
Taylor, they sort of tried to hide all of this stuff by drinking, or they tried to do a lot of it, by kind of rebelling against the
Yeah.
image that they came in with. Whereas for me, when the image I came
Oh,
in with was just
interesting.
this international student who, yeah, I didn't grow up poor, but at the same time, I've seen things. I'm lucky enough to have come here.
Yeah.
And, that's why international students are this weird breed where they don't, when you see I mean, Taylor, they're doing a march right now for, this is going to date the podcast, but they're doing a march for Jacob Blake. You know, I'm not even going to address that. Like that, the facts of that case still have to be reviewed. But I bet you, I'm willing to bet you that not a whole lot of like international students, at least from Asia, I can only speak from Asia. I can bet you not a lot of them are participating. And it's not because they don't sympathize. It's because they don't have a frame of reference, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think because I've moved so much, I would say my experiences are sort of like fragmented.
Mm.
And so there were times that like I would say I like was a part of and got to experience like the white suburban America, I don't know, just that experience. And then there were times where that was not my experience at all.
Mm.
So that kind of left me like people had an expectation of
Mm.
what kind of story I should have. Then when I had a different story, I almost felt like a faker for a lot of it because
Really?
they'd be like, "Oh, well, like, yeah," because it was like, "Oh, you lived in Hong Kong? Well,
Mm-hmm.
how long? Oh, whatever. Like, oh, you lived in like Kansas? How long? Oh, only a few years. Like, you didn't really get the whole experience. Or like, you lived in Chicago? Like,
Interesting.
oh, like the city or the suburbs?" And so it was like, most people they like are lucky enough to live in the same place for their entire lives, and so they have like a full experience. So I felt like I have grown up with a lot of partial experiences,
Mm-hmm.
so I can only partially relate to everyone, and vice versa. People can only usually partially relate to me,
Oh,
which like is my normal, so it's not like
oh.
a big deal or anything. But I
Mm-hmm.
think that it's usually like this weird thing of like, don't worry, I get it that you don't get it, but I also know that you won't get it, if that makes sense.
That does make sense, but that kind of, Alexis, that kind of breaks my heart because I don't know how it is for, well, I do kind of know how it is, but at least for dudes, okay? If you want to know why we're into video games like that, or why a lot of people are into video games, it's precisely because of that. You know, you can go from Bangkok to Indianapolis. Hey, if two guys have grown up, have sort of played Counter Strike or League of Legends in high school, guess what? They have a bonding experience right off the bat, which is why I think external culture is so important. You know, it all almost to the point where it blends into internal culture. It can lead to internal culture.
Yeah,
You know, um,
for sure.
what I've tried to figure it out for. I've tried to put a finger on it for a long time now, but what are those mechanisms for women at schools? Because like any college, I'm not just speaking for Taylor now. Like any college, like you're gonna have to have some sort of similarity, you know, because experiences, um, and grown-ups, or not even that, but like your childhood experience and where you grew up, that's like the least interesting thing once you get to school. You know, you ever find that? Yeah, honestly, you
Yeah,
know, like
yeah. Everyone forgets it. It's like, what's your major? Where are you from? Okay,
yeah,
whatever. No one's
that
gonna
big
remember,
tall
and then we move
Jamaican
on.
kid that plays basketball for school. You know, not to think solo him out or anything. He's so tired of telling people, yeah, I'm from Jamaica. You know, I play basketball. I'm tall. You know, what's more important? You know, what actually is gonna bridge that gap is, hey man, what you think of the Pacers last night? Oh, I think they totally suck. They should trade this player. What? Boom, 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 boom. Fireworks. You know,
Right.
whether or not it's
Yeah.
American culture for dudes, I think it's a lot easier. You know, they can bond off music. They can bond off video games. They can bond off. Guys are, Alexis, if you don't know by now, guys are very simple. They're simple. If they see one spark that they connect with, guess what? They're gonna it's enough, you know?
Yeah.
But women are not
Yeah.
simple. So, in a
No, it's
long-winded
not.
way, what are some mechanisms that women international kids like yourself use to relate to people here, but in a way that wasn't weird, you know, in a way that kind of clicks? Because people, once people find a clicking point, it's kind of like
Yeah.
they can go from there, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's always like it just so much depends. So like I
Mm-hmm.
really like being outside. I really like sports, like
Mm-hmm.
running. Like I like playing sports. I don't watch sports. Let me clarify that since this is like a sports podcast. I know nothing about it. Um,
I think you
but
do.
so I mean, I think America usually we relate based off of what we can do together. Like,
Hmm.
and so you can build an experience, whether that's like driving to church on Sunday, right? Like that was a huge way that I got connected with my floor because I was just like asking all of
Really?
them for rides, and then all of a sudden it
Okay.
was like they had to talk to me because we were in the car for 30 minutes on the way there and on the way
30
back.
minutes? Where did you go to
Um,
church?
dude, I went to so many churches. I went to Commonwealth for a long time. Then I don't know.
Okay. Okay, so
Um,
drives to church. All right. That's so time spent together. Okay.
yeah, so
Interesting.
I think time spent together is like pretty um the way that women can connect. I
Interesting.
don't know. I feel kind of weird speaking for all women.
No, of course you don't. I don't speak for like there's some guys that are into rock climbing. Bro, that ain't me. You know, there's some guys that are into you mentioned I don't know why this popped into my head, but when you mentioned oh, if you grew up in a suburb, odds are you went to the lake house. Yeah.
Hmm.
Bro, like I don't own a boat. I'd like to, but I don't own a boat. Or there are things that a lot of guys, the guys pick and choose just like women do. But it seems like for
Right.
guys, it's a lot simpler because even if it's, hey man, do you like flaming hot Cheetos? Yeah. Oh wow, like guys are so stupid. They'll use that as like a kind of starting point, to kind of
Right.
catapult. But I feel like with women, it's hard, and I know this kind of from talking to girls
Yeah.
who have gone from overseas to and try to mingle with uh with their American classmates. And a lot of the times I think for Asians in particular, I can't speak for other races, but if you go to any other college, because at Taylor you're kind of forced to mingle. You're kind of forced to as an Asian, you got to get out there. Most of your friends are going to be white. You
Yeah.
had better make friends with these white people and black people and Latino people and not just stick with the Asians. Otherwise, you're going to have a really boring time. That's not the case when you go to other colleges. Other
For
colleges,
sure.
it's really like I don't want to say segregated. That's not the right term at all. But I don't know. It's like again, seeing a place like UC Berkeley, which I know is very
Yeah.
Asian. It's weird. In a weird way, I think coming to a school like Taylor is even more valuable culturally for your development than say going to a large school like that, because my gut instinct as a freshman probably would have been to hang out only with people that look like me, you know. But I'm so
Mhm.
glad that wasn't the
Yeah.
case for me. I'm so glad that God sort of forced me out forced me out of my comfort zone very early on. And hey, you found deep emotional connection. It's for guys it's
Yeah.
obviously sports. I played basketball, a bunch of basketball freshman year, maybe a little too much. I had to stay around for 6 years. Um, is like I can't help but notice coffee. What is it, Alexis, with
Um,
with the suburbs and their love of coffee?
the
Okay,
caffeine addiction.
and I'm talking and
Uh,
I'm asking this question as a former barista and as a former coffee shop manager, like a shift manager. What is it with this coffee craze? When did that start? Because I know
yeah.
you've been having coffee since you were 3. You gave your brother coffee, your younger brother coffee when he
Yes.
was a
It's
toddler. What
yeah.
is going on there?
Yep. Uh, I think okay, two things. There's like the culture of coffee, like maybe in this country in this time, and also like the culture of my family. But
Sure.
I think the the idea behind this coffee culture here because all right, I'm just gonna expose it like Starbucks is fake European coffee. So like
Oh, don't say
really
that.
a
Really?
simplifies no, it really is because a simplified
But the
version of
beans are
like how
from Europe.
Starbucks came to be.
The beans
Yeah,
origins
yeah,
are
yeah.
actually from Europe. But what are you saying?
I'm saying like an American went over to Europe and enjoyed all of the cafes and how it
Oh,
brought
okay, the
about like
experience.
community
Okay.
and people would come in and be able to sit there, right? Like this cafe experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then brought this like Starbucks over, right? And like
Mm-hmm.
created their own cafe. But obviously it's like the flavors have been changed to be Americanized, right? So that Americans would enjoy it. So
And by flavors, you
typically
mean
like it's a
sugar?
lot sweeter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. um yeah, so I think it's just the experience, this idea
Mm.
that we don't really make time for people, right? Like how often do you walk past someone and you like don't like it would be culturally inappropriate to like if you're walking in downtown Chicago, if you see someone to stop by and be like, "Oh, how's your day? What's going on?" Like to like actually talk to them as if you wanted a friendship.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But if you like meet them in a cafe, then like it's acceptable for you guys to meet there in a public place that's not your home to build a friendship. And so I think that's just encouraged. And especially at Taylor, it was very, very encouraged. Like, oh, you want to make a friend with someone? Like, take them to the bean, like, whatever, go to this cafe or do this so that you like have something to like go
Mm.
to or an objective or a purpose that you can slow down enough to actually like talk to
Yeah.
the person beside you and actually like get to know what they're about, not just like their view in this one specific class. So I think coffee is just a front
Hmm.
um for relationships. Like I think the whole idea is to form relationships and to be able to like be with people.
Mm-hmm.
But because this culture is such a success-based culture, like feel guilt slowing down and doing nothing, or just like having the purpose being like, oh, I just want to like get to know you. Like that feels like
Yeah.
too serious or like strange or foreign. Um,
Well,
yeah, so that's my take on that.
at a place like Taylor, whenever you said, "Oh, hey, let's get coffee," and you tell your friends that that was what you told a girl, dude, they gave you hell. You know. Honestly, but no, that's a really good answer. I never took that into consideration because okay, I asked these questions concerning coffee coming from a guy who grew up. My dad loves Americanos. I don't know what it is. It's just like 4 shots of espresso with freaking hot water. This dude loves it so much. He
So good.
I know it's good. Okay,
Yep.
now I know. You know, having worked
Now
in
you
coffee,
know.
now I know, and it's like okay, but I'm not gonna get a latte every day. My body can't afford that. Like my body's you know, if I have a latte today and tomorrow,
Wow, the milk
dude,
and sugar, it's not good.
no. But I just worked at this in the time that I worked at the coffee shop. Man, there were kids. There were I guess kids are one thing, but there were old people coming in every day asking for like a frappuccino with a double shot with some extra whipped cream. Like, dude, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. But you know, that's a great answer. Honestly, I never considered the whole social aspect and kind of. Okay, that being said though, how many times did you visit the Starbucks at Taylor, like near Taylor, right off the 69? Did you ever go? Was that a thing that girls did? Because I knew that was a lot of girls did, but did
Oh, for
you?
sure. Yep. Um, I had some meetings there.
You
I
had meetings there.
didn't have
Yeesh.
a yep. Another thing, girls when things go wrong or they're annoyed, there has to be meetings. So I had some of those.
I wish guys were like
We're not
that.
going to talk about them, but
No. Oh, okay, okay. We're not gonna talk about them. But what do you mean when girls want to hash things out? So when you're saying kind of like how guys have like a call out, and
yeah.
then they'll go and confront them later. Like girls have. What do you mean by meetings exactly?
Um, if there was like some kind of conflict, there would usually be a meeting of like, hey, this is what happened. This is how it made me feel.
Okay.
I'm confused. And like, I think that, I mean, obviously it's a generalization to say that girls are more emotional, but like for the sake of like understanding, I think like, yeah, girls are usually more emotional. So, if there's some kind of like, um, strong negative emotion between two girls on the floor, then there's like it's just total breach of trust.
Oh, this
And then
is
without trust, it's
juicy.
like you can't like coexist. Like you can't just like brush your teeth next to this. Like no, this has to be like resolved. And whether it's like in a petty way of like I'm gonna get you back, or like in a more mature way of like, can we just sit and talk about this? Because I really need to understand, and I need you to understand so that I can forgive you and move on. That type of thing. So I don't know. I would have Starbucks like if we were. I didn't have a car, man. So like,
Hey,
still don't.
bro. I mean, sister. I still don't have a car. You know. No, I no,
Fine.
I get it. No, but here's the thing. Guys are the exact same way. They really are. The only difference is how they
Yeah.
execute. That's it. But I feel like the method of execution for guys is completely different. Like, yo, you guys are meetings. Okay, that's what you describe it as. Us? Yeah, we it's a little different. Like, and sometimes we won't even address it. This you'll just say, okay, that guy's different than me.
Yeah.
We rubbed each other the wrong way, and okay, I'll just leave it at that. I'll respect him.
Right.
Won't even address it. What happens as a result of
Yeah.
that? Snowball, 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 snowball until it becomes stupid petty, and I have to
I mean,
address
like
it.
that's just part of maturity.
Yeah,
Like
that is. That is.
sometimes, like, and discernment. Like sometimes you could like call someone out for something, and then it turns out to like really not be a big deal. But like
Mm-hmm.
other times, you like just ignore it and ignore it and ignore it, and then you're like 3 years later, like, on, what's going on here? You know?
Oh gosh, that three
I know.
years later part. It sounds like you have man. Okay, that's interesting. Because it
Yeah.
really can manifest in certain ways. Man, all this from me asking, "What's the deal with coffee?" That's getting at some juicy tidbits. So you went there quite a lot. I never went there. Never. Always drove by. I think for guys, coffee, okay, sure, is one thing. Like especially if we're meeting a girl, it might be a pretty mutually easy way to do it, right? But for guys, hey man, if a guy invites you, again, I can really only speak demographically from Sammy, okay? Or yeah, but if a guy invites you to Waffle House at like Goo God's hour of the night, or like IHOP Goo God's hour of the night, guess what, girl? That boy love you, you know. So
It's a date. Yeah.
no, it's not even a day. He just wants you around. That's beyond
Yeah.
their aspect of day. He wants you to. He's okay letting you see him in his element with other dudes. You know.
Yeah.
So in knowing I just said that to you, what is that equivalent for girls? Is there an equivalent for girls where like it's past the point of I just want to I'm trying to date you and I just want you to see me in my element. I like you so much. It's like I'm not pretending anymore. This is who I am. Hang out with my guys. I think you're cool enough. Something like that. So maybe
Yeah.
not quite dating, but also not friend zone either. It's like, hey, I want to date you eventually, but you know what? Like you're so cool. Come eat Waffle House with us and we'll shit talk a bunch of professors. This stuff like that.
Yeah.
Maybe it's in Waffle
That's
House.
a
I don't
really
know.
good question.
Yeah, what is that equivalent for girls? What how do girls reveal themselves to that is not an that's not a PG question at all. But how do girls reveal themselves to guys,
I think
Alexis?
that girls, there's not as much stigma of like, I feel like I could be off, but I feel like there's like guys sort of have this like macho, like when they are like known by everyone to like this girl, they're almost perceived as like weaker. Like I don't really know, but they like try to hide it, and I feel like girls don't hide it as much.
Are
I
you
don't really
kidding
know.
me? You
Or
you
maybe
don't think
just,
girls hide it as much? Really?
do you think girls hide it? Well, okay, when I like a guy, I just straight up tell him. So I don't, maybe I'm just not good at being a girl,
Jeez, you're
but
the oddball out. Every other instant, it's like guys have to guess.
yeah,
It is very different per person, you know. But
that's true.
I feel like no, I can't even chalk it up to a place like Taylor because guess what? Every person who's like 18, between 18 and 22, you can kind of tell. You know, there are lots of mature 18-year-olds to 22-year-olds, but you can tell. You know,
Hmm.
I say that. How old are you? You're 5 years younger than me, aren't you? You're 20 right now, aren't you?
I'm 20, yeah.
My bad.
Yep.
Anyway, um, kind of bridging off of that. Let's get back to external culture for a second. Music. Okay, that's I had a pod with my cousin last week and we were talking about how music is kind of this time machine. Um, can you let's play a fun little game here for a second. Can you kind of so your high school years, okay? You have to pick one track, one music track, or one or two. Doesn't have to be the best. Doesn't have to be particularly your favorite. Okay. Um, and I'll go first, obviously. To make it easier for you, name one track per high school year that like dominated the year. Yeah. So in a weird,
Yeah.
long-winded way, your freshman year should have been 2014, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. So you got 4 years of high school. I want you to pick a song from each of those years that defines the year. Okay. So I'm gonna go first, just to give you some time.
Time of
Fresh
the year.
freshman year for
Okay.
me would have been uh we were right off Step Up 2, so T-Pain's Low. If you T-Pain and Florida Low, if you know about it. Okay. Sophomore year
Hmm.
has to be DJ's Got Us Falling in Love Again by Usher.
Oh.
Gosh, yeah. For you, that might be middle school or freaking elementary, depending on the time. Yeah, yeah. Just judging by the reaction, I think you know what that song is. Uh, Junior year,
Yeah.
it must have been freaking. Junior year is kind of foggy for me, but uh, let's just say Rocketeer by freaking Far East Movement. You might know that as well, maybe. I don't know. And then
Mhm.
senior year, this is the one I hate the most. Gangnam Style. Cause yeah, in 2013 or 2012, 2013. Oh my gosh, yeah, like
Freaking
that was the
Gangnam
main
Style.
thing. And
Whoop,
see,
whoop.
yep, no, please. Yeah, they made me as a freshman in
Oh.
college. They some guys would kind of innocuously play the tune and expect me to start dancing to it, and then I'd run after them and try to punch them. And so all right, so you know mine
Same, same.
now. You know, we're talking about external culture. What are
Yeah.
your tracks? Give me some juicy tracks, for example.
Probably not super juicy. Um, for my freshman year, I was gonna use DJ Got Us Falling in Love Again. I was listening to that
Freshman
in middle
year,
school, but I think in high school I was like still,
it came out in
yeah.
2010. You were in high school in 2010. But okay. That's interesting.
No, no, definitely not. It's not like updated. It's just like that's when I like
Oh,
started listening to
that's
it.
when you started listening. That's when you started vibing to it.
Because
Okay.
okay, I probably didn't listen to like non-Christian music until I was like in high school. Because before then it had to be like super on the DL because like my parents didn't really know if like they wanted us to
Mm-hmm.
listen to music that was not Christian. But then when I was in high school, I was like, I'm doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But even still, there's like it takes time to like learn to like music. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think like sophomore year, probably I listened to like a lot of Rent Collective. So probably stick with something from that album. I don't know, junior year, maybe some Macklemore.
Macklemore. Oh man, that's I hate to say it, but that's a lot of
From
that it went
Oh,
oh
and senior year,
okay.
Harry Connick Jr. I like really started liking Harry Connick Jr. my senior year.
Who's
Not
that
really
and
sure
what's
why.
this? What are these songs?
Um, he originally was like most of his music was jazz, and then it became more poppy, I think. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll send you some of his stuff. I like his music.
All right, interesting.
But
So music. Hey, okay. So you just named me 4 influential tracks. I don't know why I'm talking about music. So here, just because I think it's such a crucial, yet like we don't really talk about the power of it. Because when you get to college, then you
mhm.
suddenly realize how big music actually is, how big the music world is. You know, even at a place like where we went, people have very very different tastes. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm pretty sure we could go ahead and like when you think Taylor, what are musical artists that come to mind that are synonymous with Taylor? Try not to name any Christian ones, but go ahead. Like for me, when I think Taylor, I think Imagine Dragons.
Really?
I think 21 Pilots.
That's so funny. 101 Pilots for sure.
Yeah, I don't hate
Here's
21
the
Pilots.
thing.
It's just I find it weird. It's all it's there's a genre at Taylor. And that genre definitely ain't Drake.
I think of like Taylor Swift. Yeah.
Taylor Swift, especially for them women,
Yeah.
and a few guys I know on Broho. Freaking
I bet there's several dudes who listen
oh,
to
there was a lot.
Taylor
There
Swift.
Alexis, I went to school. My roommate for 3 years had a giant Frozen poster. There's nothing that is sacred. There's nothing that is nothing to hide. Everything exposed. Okay,
Yeah.
people lived it on their sleeves. Um,
Yeah. I don't know. Lots of indie music, I feel like the stereotypical Taylor genre.
why is that so? Is that just an extension of like suburban, like the suburban experience? It's because I know so many
Yeah.
suburban students or kids that are really, really into hip hop, really, really into jazz. But there seems to be this kind of lingering kind of stereotype that everything has to be
Mm-hmm.
indie, kind of almost hipster, but not really. Uh, very kind of there's this grungy kind of image. Yeah, grunge. Kind of the you know it was grunge in the 90s and it became something else in the mid 2000s and then the 2010s kind of ushered in this kind of poppy loud vocals echoey vocals kind of thing. That's why I say Imagine Dragons, because that style where you have like kind of percussive like percussion and drums echoey,
Yeah.
I feel it in my bones. It's just this loud kind of you know
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe that might just be me typecasting a lot of Taylor and being somewhat ignorant to tastes. Because and we're not even talking about the Christian stuff yet. But
Yeah.
did you know? I didn't know this up until like 3 or a month ago, but supposedly like there's this huge Bethel versus Bethel Hillsong kind of thing where people aren't really singing it anymore because they don't agree with what the pastors are saying. Have you heard about this?
Oh yeah.
I didn't know this was a
People are
thing.
boycotting the music.
Yeah, I it's a complete surprise to me. I never thought the lyrics
Yeah.
were like horrible or heretic in any way. But
Yeah. I that's a whole nother discussion because I personally think that even some secular songs can be songs of worship. And it doesn't have to be
so I know quite a few. Take Six, this very famous vocal group back in the 90s and 80s. They took a bunch of pop songs and they made it. Like, do you know Take Six at all? They're like one of the most successful a cappella groups of all time. Like, they have so many Grammys.
I probably would recognize their music if I heard it, but I don't recognize the name.
Yeah, I know that is an entirely different conversation, but for Taylor, it's just such a interesting way to analyze, that somewhat culture clash.
Yeah.
We're just at a hour here, so I know I don't want to take up too much of your time. Thanks again, honestly, for joining. Kind of as a closing subject, or not closing subject. One of the ways I kind of want to. One of the most important questions I have to ask before we end. What do you tell someone who, okay, this is a person who's been to college with us. I'm not talking about a real person, just like hypothetical, okay?
Like a person about to be like, wow, narrowed it down.
No. Like what do you tell someone who's been told their whole life you have to travel to experience life, but then this person is too poor to travel? Like he is fortunate enough he got into college on a scholarship or whatnot. He's from like Podunk, Mary. He's from like a small town kind of America, and all the narrative that he's heard at college is that you have to travel, you have to go to other places to get other perspectives. What do you say to that? Because the reason I ask is because it always kind of bothered me, this notion of lighthouse kind of culture where people would kind of, oh, hey, in order to put your faith at another level, you need to travel and do this lighthouse experience. I'm like, well, actually, there's this orphanage in Marion that might need your help a little more than whatever it is you're doing overseas. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think I'm asking a bunch of questions 100%. At once, but yeah, what do you say to the whole, like, have to travel in order to see, like, different perspectives?
I very much value different perspectives, but I think, and I also value travel. I mean, like, most of my life has been like traveling. Like, I feel like I've had a very nomadic upbringing. And so, like, even the whole, like, I just don't have money to travel. Well, like, since my life was traveling, like, I think there's like a cheaper way to do it other than like going to like Bali and living in a villa for a month, like, it doesn't have to be that. But if the focus or the point of traveling is to gain a new perspective, I would say that as Christians, like, we're doing that, or we should be doing that every day. Because I mean, like, studying the Bible, like, it was not written to Americans like living in the 20th century, right? Like, it was, so that in itself, to understand the context of it, is a cultural endeavor, a cross-cultural endeavor. And so I think that that's a huge example of, just like we can read and experience a different culture and learn from it, and like our lives can be changed from like that different perspective, then why can't it be changed from other people's experiences? So like, you did not grow up, like, you grew up in Thailand, right? And so someone may not be able to go to Thailand, but like hearing about your experiences and about like your home, that can give you a window, an idea into like your perspective and someone else's perspective of someone who also maybe grew up in Thailand. And so I think that, especially because of the internet, we live in an age where like we don't value the resources that we have enough because they're constantly there. But I think books, podcasts, music, studying languages, or even like, what economic demographic did you grow up in? Live in a different one, like, if you
I live in a very different one.
And so like, you can very easily, I mean, even going from like, I it wasn't until like I was in college that I actually went into like the countryside of America and I like saw what it was like to like have a farm in the South and like they actually sit in rocking chairs on their porch and they eat like chicken and dumplings, but the dumplings are like they're not like Asian dumplings, like they don't have anything in them. So like that was like a totally different perspective. And so like you don't necessarily have to take a plane to be in a completely different neighborhood and hear even different languages. I know like where I live in Aurora, like if I go 4 blocks to the right from my house, like I am in a neighborhood that's like mostly everyone there speaks Spanish. The neighborhood that I'm in now, like there's a lot of Indians all around us. And
Well,
if
there's Indians here
I
too.
go
Interesting.
4 blocks to the left, yeah, it's like mostly white people. And so like I don't think it's difficult now to gain new perspective if that's truly what you're searching for. But I think the key is if you want to understand a different perspective, like you have to have that desire to understand. And if you don't have that desire, then like you're not going to understand. So I think it just depends on the level of desire you have for a different or new perspective than your own.
It's a good way of going about it, intentionality. But yeah, I guess as a funny story, I it always sort of bothered me that there were lots of people at the place that we went to school like that had this idea that to have that perspective you needed to get on a plane. I think that's what I'm trying to get at here is you don't, because I for 3 out of the 4 years that I was 3 out of for 3 years or so I played at a Pentecostal church. uh I played drums for a Pentecostal gospel church. Oh man, it's a world of difference every single Sunday. You may have gone to one
Oh
before.
yeah.
Um, yeah, Downtown Tabernacle in the heart of Marion. There's
What
not
church
one
did you go to?
the Downtown Tabernacle in Marion. I don't know if you've ever been there. Um,
Yeah.
but
I
and
think I visited a few
I
times.
would have known if you've been there once because I played every single Sunday for 3 years. But yeah, it's such a world of difference. And it would always, Sunday afternoons, like Sunday lunch, would always be so jarringly hard because there's not one Sunday that goes by at that church, or rarely, that someone doesn't cry. You know, it's a very kind of broken kind of community.
Yeah.
Lots of brokenness. And, you know, you go from that type of environment, very spiritually charged, when you invite the presence of God and whatnot, right? And you go back to Taylor and everyone's very smiley, happy. Hey, how's it going? And you just like, oh, I just saw a woman like scream at the top of her lungs. She was so upset at like,
Yeah.
the outbreak of meth in certain community and whatnot. But I like what you said. Cause it always, funny story there. This is one student, I'm not gonna name him, but this dude was trying to get me to do like a lighthouse trip slash study abroad thing in Ireland. Now, not that I have any problem with studying abroad, but guess what, buddy? Like, I'm kind of already doing it, like.
Oh, there's the tea.
I'm kind of already doing it, and uh, he flat out told me, this guy flat out told me, oh, this doesn't really count. I looked him square in the eye. I'm like, you've got to be out of your goddamn mind. Like the idea of proposing an international study or a study abroad to an international student. Like the thought of going to England on top of already being in America. Do you know how expensive it is? Like it's just what I'm getting at. Travel is notoriously expensive. And I feel like Instagram like kind of perpetuates the whole, oh, if you're not traveling in life, you're not successful. If travel was successful, you and I would be millionaires. If that was the kind of the root of success, guess what? Like I've been to Japan 6 times.
Yeah.
I've been to England. I've been to France. I've been to freaking Dubai. I've been to California. I've been to Wisconsin. It's just like, it's not the measure of success, but I feel like a lot of teenagers, especially growing up now with Instagram, they see pictures of people in Rome. You know, Drake has this wonderful, in his song Emotionless, he has this really interesting lyric where he says, you know, I knew a girl that all she wanted to do was go to Rome. I'm paraphrasing, but when she got to Rome, all she did was take her pictures on her phone to send it to her friends. And like, after she got back from Rome or whatnot, she would save the pictures and post them every now and again to pretend like she was on the go. Like, you know, that picture / that image, Drake, like, you know, we all have different thoughts on him, but that one song, wow, that hit me hard. Just like, cause I know so many people like that, you know, people that are jealous of people like you and me, when really there's really not a whole lot to be jealous about. It's an experience that is gained, which is why I as the years went on at Taylor, I got so kind of uncomfortable with the fact of, you know, the us and them, international student and them kind of mentality. Because at a certain point, I think I figured out, like, people are people. Travel from Bangkok to freaking Indianapolis to Hodunk, Indiana. People are the same. You know, it's just, and that's why, to a large extent, as an international student, as the years went on, I sort of like kind of chose not to interact as much with, you know, ISO or ISU or, you know, Mukapa I kept in good touch with, because guess what? Mukapa is very diverse. You know? But like international student union or whatnot, like, it just felt weird to, like, yeah, we're Asian. Yeah. Or Asia or whatnot. Or like these student organizations. I'm not trying to bash them at all. Just for me, I get it. As the years went on, it's like, well, you know, these guys are my friends now. I can't really say I'm different than them, because I'm not, you know, go to class. We have to, you know, stuff like that. I don't know if that was ever the case for you, and you're not there anymore, obviously, but a little before we go, let's talk a little bit about your major, what you did there, for example, and kind of what you want to, I know this is kind of a lofty question because of COVID. You know, there's a bunch of things that have changed your career goals and your future goals for the time being, but kind of bring me up to speed with what's going on with you, like how, where do you go from here? Because guess what, you and I are in the same boat, you know, almost. But yeah, you're now no longer a Taylor anymore. Congrats. So what happens now, basically?
Like, and you can give me
long or a short answer. You don't even have to answer the question if you're uncomfortable with it. Just, you know, what's going on?
I mean, I was majoring in anthropology and sociology at Taylor. I went there for 2 years and dropped out. And I
don't feel bad.
It's been
about
very
that.
freeing. No, I don't. I think it's very interesting. Some people feel very bad for me, and I'm like, you really don't know me.
No.
But for like, even for like Taylor students who might be listening, like I really enjoyed my time there, and like it was not a mistake at all. But it very much, like, even though it was 2 years and I did not walk away with the degree, I still feel like my season there came to an end and it's finished. So super thankful for my time there. Yeah, and there's a lot of questions like, what do I want out of my career? What do I want to do? What do I need to make that happen? And all I have is like this super general, non-specific answer, is that I really like people and I really like to be around them and to help them out.
That's very obvious. That's very off. No, that's a great answer. You couldn't have given a more Alexis answer. You are very good for people. People all have different types of backgrounds too. I mean, you tend to attract a lot of interesting personalities. We'll get to that after this podcast has ended. I don't take too much of your time there, but no, like, that's a great answer. That will lead to options, because the number one thing that kind of destroys a lot of people when they don't have like an immediate goal is look at me, I'm talking like I know what I'm saying. But like, if you don't, it's hard because there are a lot of non-people people, and they're just as much needed in society as people as introverts. They're much
Right.
they're a crucial part of society as much as extroverts, and you kind of strike me as
Yeah.
the kind of half balance. You can go you can go at it 100%. You're about it, but at the same time you're also ambidextrous. You caught the money with both hands. you know
Yep.
that is, oh, I dropped the Floyd Mayweather quote on you. Oh, yikes. um yeah. So okay, anthropology and sociology at Taylor,
Yeah.
at a school. Well, how was your experience?
So right.
What was your experience with that kind of track? Like, did you learn anything you didn't before, especially with using Taylor as kind of a petri dish? You did?
Um, Definitely. I think that it was really helpful in understanding that there are people and their cultures, and then there are also systems within the culture. And so that's like anthropology, people and cultures, and then sociology is like the systems within
Mm-hmm.
that. And so I think I really appreciate it because I feel like my whole life I've been studying people and cultures. Like my whole life has been like an
Mm-hmm.
uh, anthropology major essentially. Like I just have so many influences and experiences there. But then to kind of break it down and like take the culture and the people and like because I feel like I sort of take culture personally almost. So like
Mm-hmm.
wherever someone is from or like their experiences, I want to like hold up a banner and like be excited and like be in that with them and like
Yeah.
share those experiences with them. Um, and so then when a system is failing, it was hard for me to separate the system from the culture and like not be offended and be like, are you blaming the culture right now? Because like the culture is incredible. This is like how it is like great. And these are
Mm-hmm.
the benefits that like you have not experienced because you're not in this culture. But it really helped me to understand um, are very different and just to separate that and to break it down. Yeah, so I felt like I still feel like it was very valuable
Mm-hmm.
um, just time, and I learned a lot, and I'm still very interested in the subject. Um, but yeah, right now I'm just kind of switching gears. Um,
That's fine.
I'm taking an EMT class while I'm waiting. Um,
Okay.
I might move to France. That stuff is kind of pending. Global
Ooh,
pandemic slowing
I'm
me down,
excited.
but
Yeah, I'm sorry, by the way. Yeah,
yeah.
that it has been rough. Like, please know you're not the only one whose plans have gotten derailed. It's, me trying to be a
Oh yeah.
sports journalist or whatnot. Earlier this year, right when COVID started happening, I was really wanting to cover high school games. It was right around the time high school basketball had its tournament season. And these are crucial games. These are games that
Right.
colleges use as like kind of a petri dish to how its students perform and whatnot, and that all shut down just like that.
Yep.
And I didn't anticipate that I'd be working at a grocery store, you know. But hey, that's where life has us right now. And
Yep.
just, yeah.
Exactly.
So hey, we've just passed an hour 30. You did an hour 30. You are a complete natural. You are as advertised when I thought to have you on, as far as uh your knowledge base and just your learning experience. Do stick around after this. I do want to touch base with you a little more, but Alexis Hale, this has been the Crunchy Take 16. Thanks for joining. Thanks for being on.
Yeah. Thanks you. It's been good, James.
All right. All right, guys, that's the Crunchy Take for this week. And tune in next week for, I don't know, maybe a coach that I'm trying to bring up. But yep, catch you guys later.